abashimira foromagisi yanyitayeho ikandwanaho ikamfasha ikabimfashije nkaba ngiye mu ndege nkaba ngiye kujya mu Buhinde kureba yuko umwana wanjye bamuvura agakira.
Everything begins as an act of hope, as well as most good things that happen in our lives. We may not have what it takes to achieve what we are always wishing for, but hope is stronger than anyone could ever imagine. Today, we see Reverata and her son, who come from a deep African village, flying to India.
I have a challenge for all of you. Go to every computer in your house, your mom's, your dad's, your sister, your brother's computer, and install Honey. Wait, Mom, before you check out.
The process took time, but finally, they got there and arrived safely. They managed to meet the doctors that were supposed to treat the baby. Well, about 3 months ago, we published a story about this baby and his mother. Everyone in their society called him an alien because of the way that he was born. They always resisted and did not want to come close to this family because they were scared of this baby. She is called Everata and she is his mother. What was happening to her is unbelievable since her son was going through unspeakable pain. She was abandoned by the father of this baby the moment he was born. She tried treatment which she could not at all afford. You are probably wondering what is happening to them today. This is their story. Reverata is a grown lady and she has a family and some other children that she gave birth to even before this baby. She lived with her husband in the city, and though they did not have money, life for them was not that bad. She later got pregnant and it was a normal thing because she had given birth to other children before. She was at home until time for giving birth came, and then she was taken by her husband to the hospital to give birth. When she gave birth to this baby, her husband immediately turned against her and started acting like he was not happy at all about what he was looking at. He started having ideas that his wife never knew anything about. He said that he was not responsible for this kind of monster that she had given birth to. He told her to take this child to the devil. She was then confused and thought that it was a joke until she watched him walk away and never came back again. She was abandoned in the hospital by her own husband. She finally found a good Samaritan that was kind enough to drive them back home, and she was so thankful for the great heart that he had. She got home and now she was supposed to take care of these children, feed them each and every day, pay their school fees, yet she was not working at all. She kept on wondering how she was going to do this, yet she could not leave this house because of this baby that she had given birth to. The baby's condition kept on getting worse each and every day. He was going through a lot of pain, and upon the doctors looking at him, they were also shocked. It was a small hospital in town, and they could not do anything for this baby. The doctors told her to go back home, and they would call her if there was anything they could do. She waited for months, but they still did not call. She had to figure out a way that she was going to get her child treatment because she was not getting any help. Life in the city was becoming so expensive and difficult. she decided to go back to the far village where she was born, talk to her parents and elders, and see if there was anything they could do about her baby's condition because he was dying. She left her other children at home and they were still young and poor, but now she had to leave them on their own because she could not afford transportation for all of them from the city to the village where she was going, so she had to leave them behind. When she got to the village, they were all shocked and felt sorry for her. They advised her to kill this baby because all he was going to bring in her life was pain, disappointments, and nothing more than that. She could not kill her child, so she decided to fight for his life to the very last minute. Her family could not also help because they were poor and barely got anything to eat. This is where she lived, and obviously she did not get the help that she was looking for. This was when they were visited by Afrimax and their story was told to the world. A lot of people around the globe watched this story, they were touched and decided to do something about this baby's condition. Since she was asking for help to take her baby for advanced treatment, people donated money that was supposed to be used to give this baby the kind of treatment that he deserved. They were taken to the city. The doctors did all they could, but they concluded by saying that this baby needed a special surgery in India because they weren't going to get any help from this country. Well, we could not make another story requesting for help because the funds that were donated were enough to help them travel to India and get the surgery that the baby was seeking for. The next step was to start processing travel documents for the both of them. It was not easy because it really took time. Since then, they have been living in this hotel in the city and they were patiently waiting for the processing to be done so that they could fly to India for treatment of their baby. We visited them at the hotel that she was staying at in the city and she could not believe that this was actually happening. She had been seeking for help in a lot of different hospitals, friends and family. Honestly, she never managed to get help from any of them until now. And she is so grateful to the people that donated and Afrimax as well.
ubwo nkabashimira nkagenda amahoro nkazagaruka amahoro kandi mfite icyizere ko umwana wanjye agomba gukira ubwo bantereranaga ngo ntabwo ari umuntu singomba kumutunga ahubwo arabutwa n'uwamwica akavaho.
Surprisingly, after her husband got to know that a lot of people donated money to her, he came back, asked for forgiveness, and asked for another chance as well. She says that up to now, she is still thinking about what to do with him. On the 18th of November, it was the date that we all long waited for. It was time to fly to India because all the required documents had been found. Passports, visas, air tickets, as well as treatment documents. They got on a plane and flew to India. This was what we all wished for in the first place. We thank each and every one of you that contributed to make this happen. And now, we confidently believe and say that we have hope that the baby's life is going to change and get saved from the pain that he was going through. Doctors are now taking care of them and they're still observing the baby's condition, and soon he will undergo surgery. We hope that everything is going to be okay, and by the time another update is available, everything will be good news. At the end of the day, we must go forward with hope and not backward with fear and vision. Thank you for watching. My name is Prince. This is Afrimax English. Do not forget to subscribe.
The titular flesh pit, also known as the Permian Basin superorganism, located in western Texas. The concept is the world-building brainchild of Trevor Roberts, and it has been expanded on greatly in many ways by many people since its original conception. While it's certainly possible for me to make several videos summarizing various aspects of the park and its organism, in this one I'll just be reading a disaster report that was written in the wake of the most notable accident to have occurred at the park. It should provide a fascinating, albeit dryly written, look at the organism, the park, and what exactly occurred in 2007. United States Commission on Geobiological Resources and Public Safety. 2007 Permian Basin Superorganism Disaster. Final Incident Investigation Report. Prepared in cooperation with the U.S. Department of the Interior, the National Park Service, and the U.S. Geological Survey. The U.S. Commission on Geobiological Resources and Public Safety, CGR, is an independent federal agency whose mission is to ensure the safety of workers, the public, and the environment by investigating and preventing accidents relating to the Permian Basin superorganism. The CGR is a scientific investigative organization. It is not an enforcement or regulatory body. Established by the Special Resources Development Act of 1980, the CGR is responsible for determining the root and contributing causes of accidents, issuing safety recommendations, studying geobiological safety issues, and evaluating the effectiveness of other government agencies and private enterprises involved with the Permian Basin superorganism. No part of the conclusions, findings, or recommendations of the CGR relating to any accident may be admitted as evidence or used in any action or suit for damages. See 42 U.S.C. 74126G. The CGR makes public its actions and decisions through investigation reports, summary reports, safety bulletins, safety recommendations, case studies, incident digests, special technical publications, and statistical reviews. Any use of trade, firm, or product names is for descriptive purposes only and does not imply endorsement by the U.S. government. U.S. Commission on Geobiological Resources and Public Safety, Office of Congressional Public and Board Affairs, 2175 K Street Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20037-1848. 1.0.0 Executive Summary. At 9:41 p.m. CST on July 4, 2007, the Permian Basin Superorganism Natural Preserve, known colloquially as the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park, experienced a catastrophic disaster which resulted in over 750 fatalities and over 1,800 major injuries. In the weeks following the incident, approximately 18,000 individuals from the surrounding communities sought medical and psychological treatment for ailments, including breathing problems, chest pains, shortness of breath, nausea, birth defects, hallucinations, depression, anxiety, internal bleeding, sore throat, and headaches as a direct result of contact with gastric ejecta, which had been introduced to the atmosphere. Investigators have concluded that this disaster was chiefly characterized by a premature geobiological consumption event caused by the catastrophic failure of critical park infrastructure to constrain and limit the gastric, motor, and neurological actions of the Permian Basin superorganism. Investigators have concluded that the failure of these critical safety measures are the direct result of negligent practices by the primary site operations contractor, Anodyne Deep Earth Mining, a subsidiary of Anodyne Incorporated. The U.S. Commission on Geobiological Resources and Public Safety released its first report on the Permian Basin superorganism disaster in August 2007, the interim report, which highlighted technical findings and safety system deficiencies. The report issued recommendations to Anodyne Incorporated, the city of Gumption, Texas, the state of Texas, the U.S. Department of the Interior, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and the U.S. Department of Energy. As of April 2008, these groups have made progress in implementing the recommendations to improve the regulatory requirements for geobiological resource extraction, geobiological resource containment, and general public safety as it relates to the Permian Basin superorganism. 2.1.0 Anodyne Background. Anodyne was originally founded as the Anchor Mineral Company in 1923. In 1958, the Anchor Mineral Company merged with Dynamic Equipment LLC to form a new company known as Anodyne Deep Earth Mining, later changed to Anodyne. Headquartered in Arlington, Texas, and prior to its 2008 restructuring, Anodyne Corporation was the 23rd largest American company by revenue. Globally, Anodyne employed over 28,000 people. It operated 7 major research, development, and production facilities around the world, 6 of which were in the United States. Anodyne filed for bankruptcy in late 2008, but ended its bankruptcy in February 2009, pursuant to a court-approved plan of reorganization. A new board of directors changed the name of Anodyne to the Permian Basin Recovery and Superorganism Containment Corporation, and emphasized reorganizing and liquidating certain operations and assets of the pre-bankruptcy Anodyne. 2.2.0 Permian Basin Superorganism Background. The Permian Basin Superorganism, Emanus calaceus, also known by the popular nomenclature of mystery flesh pit, is a subterranean organism unique to modern biology, being the sole occupant of the phylum Emanegma. The organism was discovered by a pilot well drilling crew in 1973. Later efforts were made to expose more of the organism through drilling and surface mining explosives. The superorganism is chiefly characterized by its immense size, which is still a matter of geobiological debate. Surveys suggest that the organism may span many hundreds of miles beneath the Permian Basin horizontally, with scientists speculating that the organism may extend vertically into the upper mantle of the Earth's interior. The complete anatomical layout and internal organization of the organism is unknown. Tissue samples suggest that the organism contains gastrointestinal, vascular, respiratory, musculoskeletal, nervous, limbic, and integumentary systems, with remarkable similarity to mammal life, while also containing a variety of systems which have no direct analog and are not fully understood. The feeding cycle of the organism is poorly understood and believed to occur on a complex and long-term schedule of dormancy and activity. It has been hypothesized that the superorganism derives caloric energy from subterranean hydrocarbon deposits, though the organism has been observed to digest and absorb organic matter. The depth at which the organism extends into the surrounding rock strata indicates that the organism is several 100,000 years old. It is unknown what the natural lifespan of the species is, or if the Permian Basin superorganism represents a mature or developing example of the species. 3.0.0 Incident Timeline. Start of relevant timeline. 10:29 a.m., July 4th. Unseasonably high rains forced park administrators to cancel a July 4th concert and fireworks display scheduled to take place on the surface park grounds. Many visitors who had already purchased tickets to the event become upset, and a decision is made to extend the park hours until midnight for those who had purchased event tickets. 8 p.m., July 4th. Normal closing time for the national park. A typical shift change of reduced night staff in the control room takes place. 9:16 p.m., July 4th. Harvesting crews working in the western extremities of the organism set a new extraction record to meet a quota for bonuses in time for the holiday weekend. 9:30 p.m., July 4th. Control room operators initiate a routine system self-test and discover a relay fault error resulting from increased electrical demand from mining equipment and tourist infrastructure. A control room operator logs the fault and notifies an on-duty engineer. 9:41 p.m., July 4th. Water drainage from surface rain into the entry orifice begins to collect in the sand gullet. Drainage pumps are automatically activated by a sensor system, but fail to initialize due to the relay fault. An emergency backup pump running on a separate emergency circuit is automatically activated. 9:42 p.m., July 4th. A critical alarm in the control room alerts operators that the emergency water pump has seized and is inoperative. Under lubrication of the pump's impeller bushings resulted in corrosion due to the moist interior of the flesh pit environment. 9:48 p.m., July 4th. Technicians arrive at the primary pump station to discover the sand gullet almost completely submerged. Water begins to pour over the dorsal respiratory ridge and into bronchial bulbules. Control room operators divert power to hydraulic stent rams to brace for expected choke response. 9:51 p.m., July 4th. Technicians repair the relay fault as control staff reset the park's electrical grid. The grid is offline for 45 seconds. The automatic PA system does not notify guests, as the system is scheduled to automatically shut down at the normal 8 p.m. closing time. The temporary lapse of lighting causes many guests to become panicked and return to the main gantry lift at the lower visitor center. 9:52 p.m., July 4th. A choking action from the organism begins 31 seconds into the electrical reset. The main dorsal trunk violently flexes. Lack of power to hydraulic arming rams causes irreparable damage to several sections of internal infrastructure. 9:53 p.m., July 4th. As the electrical system finishes the reboot cycle, the dynamic hydraulic actuators supporting the lower visitor center overcorrect for stability, not accounting for the shift in the wall lining of the nexial cavity in which the visitor center facility is anchored. 2 of the 6 structural supports are torn from their foundations, which causes the facility to list 20 degrees off vertical. The base joint of the vertical entry gantry is bent beyond its design limit angle. 9:54 p.m., July 4th. The master alarm is tripped automatically. Surface facilities are notified as response teams are given the order to mobilize. 9:56 p.m., July 4th. Park rangers are dispatched to rescue groups of visitors trapped in partially collapsed tunnels and trails. 10:03 p.m., July 4th. Continued movement of the organism, combined with rainwater, causes one of the upper entry gantry supports to slip. An outbound elevator conducts an emergency stop, stranding over 24 visitors. 10:05 p.m., July 4th. Tremors registered as far away as the DFW Metroplex. 10:06 p.m., July 4th. Soil liquefaction disables surface facilities in and around the organism. Dilation anchors begin retracting to keep the entry orifice open. 10:12 p.m., July 4th. A master failsafe is activated by the automated park management system. 20,000 liters of aconitine compound are injected into the superorganism via a distributed network of relay stations located throughout its known internal anatomy. 10:12 p.m., July 4th. Tremors and convulsions intensifies. The entry gantry connection to the lower visitor center detaches completely. the lower visitor center begins to collapse downward into the nexial cavity. 10:12 p.m. July 4th. Peristaltic muscle action of the nexial cavity begins to exert substantial pressure on the outer structure of the lower visitor center facility. 10:15 p.m. July 4th. The prime labia junction just west of the septum falls geobiological feature flexes into an open position, releasing a torrent of lactogastric chyma into the dorsal trunk. It is likely that this was a reaction to the aconitine injection. 10:16 p.m. July 4th. Peristaltic spasms force the caustic chyma slurry through the nexial cavity and up through the lower and upper moisture crops toward the surface orifice. 10:16 p.m. July 4th. Many guests attempting to flee the stalled elevator near the entry orifice attempt climbing out the upper moisture crop, but are ultimately unsuccessful due to torrential rains causing the surfaces to become very slippery. Many end up falling back into the maw. 10:17 p.m. July 4th. The chyma slurry erupts from the surface orifice in a geyser several hundred meters in height. Large pieces of undigested organic matter crush several vehicles and damage windows. 10:19 p.m. July 4th. Following the several minute-long ejecta event, a deep and incredible loud roar erupts from the entry orifice as ground tremors intensify further. Large extremities begin surfacing through bedrock and soil approximately 30 kilometers to 120 kilometers from the entry orifice. 10:25 p.m. July 4th. The acrid smell of the gastric ejecta can be detected as far as Odessa, Texas. 10:26 p.m. July 4th. 2 Park Service vehicles and a tour vehicle containing Park Service employees and several guests attempt to ascend through the entry orifice tube. 10:27 p.m. July 4th. Peristaltic action crushes one of the tour vehicles and sucks the other 2 vehicles back into the nexial cavity and down into a digestive organ. These vehicles are presumed destroyed. 10:58 p.m. July 4th. The Pentagon is given authorization from the White House to use nuclear force, if necessary, to prevent the organism from entering an active and/or ambulatory state. 11:02 p.m. July 4th. The on-site operations director within the lower visitor center control room initiates a final fail-safe measure in the form of the contingency measure. 11:02 p.m. July 4th. Master event log records successful spin-up of the contingency measure. 11:05 p.m. July 4th. Lower visitor center structural integrity is critically compromised, resulting in total collapse. 11:05 p.m. July 4th. Data connection with lower visitor center is severed. 11:13 p.m. July 4th. Spasms and motor action of the superorganism begins to noticeably subside. Response teams begin to descend into the surface orifice to attempt rescue operations. 11:19 p.m. July 4th. Response team encounters a visitor group which had attempted escape from stalled elevator. Most are dead. The remainder are mortally wounded and partially digested due to caustic gastric ejecta. 11:42 p.m. July 4th. Radio contact established with Ranger vehicle trapped within Oyster's shame. Due to ventricle closure, no feasible rescue strategy can be developed before complete mastication occurs. 11:56 p.m. July 4th. Response team confirms that contingency measure and associated facility are still intact and operating. 11:58 p.m. July 4th. Texas Governor Rick Perry formally declares a state of emergency for Gumption County. 12:22 a.m. July 5th. Response teams route data power umbilical to new base camp in contingency measure facility. 12:35 a.m. July 5th. 3 interpit life forms are identified as having been ejected onto the surface. 15 visitors are injured and 7 are hunted by interpit life forms during panicked evacuation of surface resort. 12:41 a.m. July 5th. Park staff managed to kill the 3 large life forms. 1:02 a.m. July 5th. National Guard helicopters begin delivering supplies and personnel to aid in site containment. 1:58 a.m. July 5th. Field hospital is constructed to care for wounded visitors and staff. 2:37 a.m. July 5th. Initial damage surveys report catastrophic destruction of internal park infrastructure. Pit geobiology has dramatically changed in hazard level. 3 a.m. July 5th. Emergency teleconference of Anodyne Executive Leadership. National Parks Director and Secretary of the Interior are present. 3:12 a.m. July 5th. Executive decision is made to initiate FEMA response and assemble a task force for containing superorganism. 4 a.m. July 5th. Media helicopters and vehicles begin to report on the scope of disaster. 4:39 a.m. July 5th. Base camp technicians begin to spin down contingency measure. Large fractures due to inertial stress have appeared on mineral components. Engineers advise against reinitializing contingency measure until mineral components can be replaced or repaired. 6:08 a.m. July 5th. Ground personnel begin assembling a pump system to inject industrial sedatives into the superorganism. Transport trucks containing industrial sedative arrive. 9:45 a.m. July 5th. Emergency teleconference of Anodyne shareholders. 11:20 a.m. July 5th. Several injured visitors inexplicably leave field hospital and begin walking towards open pit orifice. Approximately 38 individuals are able to crawl back into the orifice over the course of 8 hours. None are recovered. 3:51 p.m. July 5th. Radio transmission from trapped ranger vehicles ceases. Many speculate that other small groups of visitors and staff are still trapped. End of relevant timeline. 4.0.0 Final Investigation Report. The following final investigation report addresses additional investigation findings not covered in the previous report, including analysis of the Anodyne organization, emergency response and safety culture, industry disaster response standards, structural integrity standards, and effective performance of mystic contingency measures. 4.1.0 Technical Findings. This report highlights the following technical findings. An in-depth discussion appears in the interim report. 4.1.1 The electrical distribution scheme for the interior operations of the Permian Basin superorganism nature preserve was modeled on a typical supply-load grid layout often found in mines, with power provided by a gas-fired plant located within the surface support compound. Unlike typical mining power distribution networks, the power load was split with the facilities involved in the tourism and natural preservation operations within the organism. This split demand yielded a load fluctuating from 33 kilovolts to 60 kilovolts, depending on a range of factors from resource extraction output, visitor throughput, hydrostatic and barometric fluctuations within the organism, and the ambient blood pressure of the organism. This unorthodox load distribution scheme required careful demand oversight and was subject to failure if operated outside of design load specifications. Such a failure occurred on July 4, 2007, when operators increased electrical demand beyond design load specifications by both extending resource extraction operations while simultaneously increasing visitor throughput loads on trail infrastructures. 4.1.2 Hydrochloric corrosion is common in geobiological resource extraction, where naturally occurring hydrochloric compounds react with steel equipment. Process variables that affect corrosion rates include the total hydrochloric content of the enzyme secretions, flow conditions, application of TUMS industrial organic corrosion inhibitor solve, and the system temperature and humidity. Virtually all geobiological operations equipment is subject to this type of corrosion and requires routine inspections and preventative maintenance to ensure that metallic and non-metallic corrosion-prone surfaces are operating at design strength. The investigation has concluded that the corrosion found within the primary impeller bushings within the emergency drainage pumps was caused by hydrochloric corrosion due to poor maintenance. 4.1.3 Foundations and other anchor support structures within the Permian Basin superorganism are critical components of park infrastructure, which require careful planning and construction oversight. Under nominal conditions, anchor sites are selected by engineers to meet design load specifications, with consultation from bacteriobiologists for minimum anatomical disturbance. Rigid geobiological strata, such as bone and dense cartilage, are most often selected for load-bearing anchor points for their relative stability and similarity to conventional load-bearing strata, such as rock. However, many locations within the Permian Basin superorganism are primarily characterized by dense compositions of soft tissues, requiring novel anchoring solutions. Several anchors within the primary entry tube utilize a cleat-based stent system, which engages the entry tube muscle walls. These forces are equalized by the use of circular retention trusses, which, when combined with vibration dampening actuators, form a rigid support assembly upon which fixed components such as the entry gantry may be affixed. Peristaltic action of a muscle tube has the potential to rotate a circular cleat stent frame by up to 90 degrees, eliminating the retaining capabilities of the frame. It is for this reason that design specification standards call for the installation of either rigid or tensile support members between consecutive retaining frames. In cases such as within the entry tube, tensile cables were selected to provide this support. These cables are subject to corrosion and must be routinely inspected in order to ensure that they meet minimum design load specifications. The investigation has concluded that the cables installed on the entry tube retaining frame system were improperly maintained and failed due to corrosive weakening of the cable members. 4.1.4 The use of a previously untested contingency measure by operators, while not the primary inciting incident of the disaster, is a prime contributor to the outstanding collateral damage. A network of sensor stations embedded throughout the Permian Basin superorganism had acted as a distributed sensory system, intended by park planners to provide a method for observing large-scale changes to the organism's condition. As an experimental contingency measure, each station was outfitted with a mechanism capable of injecting up to 15 liters of a concentrated aconitine solution. Aconitine is commonly used as an acute toxin for large mammals such as whales, and was chosen for its theoretical effectiveness on key muscle groups within the organism. Park planners were under the assumption that a rapid injection of large volumes of aconitine would act as a sedative agent, without inducing tissue death beyond the immediate injection sites. The investigation has concluded that this injection failsafe was directly responsible for escalating the motor response of the organism to levels beyond the design load strength of critical park infrastructure. The investigation has also concluded that the aconitine injection failsafe was directly responsible for causing the toxic shock response within the organism, which resulted in a gastric ejecta event. 4.1.5 The contingency measure is hypothesized to function by utilizing a series of standing harmonic and ultrasonic wavelengths which have been observed to affect the overall behavior of the Permian Basin superorganism. These waves are created by applying a 15 MHz mechanical percussion to the face of an excavated large quartz crystal, also known as mystic artifacts number 15, number 21, and number 22. Once struck, the unique properties of the relic propagate the wave outward and into the surrounding anatomy of the Permian Basin organism. When placed upon a rapidly rotating turntable, the effect can be multiplied and oriented, allowing a high degree of theoretical influence over the organism. This contingency measure was activated only once and demonstrated the potential application this technology may have in future containment measures. However, at the time of this investigation, no additional relics have been located intact. Without this key assembly component, the CGR does not recommend additional experimental uses of the contingency measure. 4.2.0 Organizational Findings. 4.2.1 Anodyne did not effectively implement internal recommendations to help prevent structural failures to hydrochloric corrosion. In the 8 years prior to the incident, a small number of Anodyne personnel with knowledge and understanding of bacterial biology recommended on several occasions either a one-time inspection of every component within the primary interpark infrastructure system, known as a 100% component inspection, or an upgrade of the material of construction of these key infrastructure components. The recommendations were not implemented effectively, and many key structural and mechanical components remained in service until failure on July 4, 2007. 4.2.2. Anodyne failed to perform internally recommended 100% component inspections. Anodyne metallurgists released a formal report dated September 30th, 2004, nearly 3 years before the incident, titled Updated Inspection Strategies for Preventing Hydrochloric Corrosion Failures in Critical Systems. The investigation has concluded that these recommendations were not properly implemented. 4.2.3. The CGR identified several contributing causes of the July 5, 2007 incident relating to the safety culture at Anodyne. 1. Decision-making that encourages continued operation of tourism and resource extraction operations despite hazardous working conditions. 2. Reluctance among employees to use their stop work authority. Recent safety culture surveys performed within resource extraction sites indicate that employees had become less willing to use their stop work authority between 2003 and 2006. And 3. Substandard equipment maintenance practices. Those same surveys indicate that Anodyne employees saw increased problems in how the internal operations infrastructure maintained its equipment between 2003 and 2006. 4.2.4. Anodyne did not effectively identify in the incident command structure the damage mechanisms that could have caused the failures on the night of the incident. The OSHA Hazardous Operations and Emergency Response Standard states that the incident commander shall identify to the extent possible all hazardous conditions present in an emergency response situation. However, the appropriate technical expertise necessary for identification was not effectively consulted in the incident command structure on July 5, 2007. This lack of knowledge of all potential causes of the incident led the incident commander to direct emergency responders to take actions that may have ultimately exacerbated the hazard condition and put many Park Service personnel, Anodyne personnel, as well as civilian visitors in harm's way. It also led the incident commander to limit the hazard zone to a small area that did not consider the possibility of a gastric ejecta event. When the gastric ejecta event occurred, personnel and emergency equipment positioned in the safe zone were engulfed in the volume of caustic ejecta. 5.1.0. Incident Conclusions. 5.1.1. The CGR found that the failure of this incident is indicative of a fragmented hazard management approach that placed the responsibility to implement safety recommendations on stakeholders, which stood to benefit from decreased oversight while also incurring financial loss for any safety oversight restrictions placed. Consequences of this cultural attitude surrounding the tourism and resource extraction operations within the Permian Basin superorganism led to the severe underestimation of the capabilities of the organism, as well as the capabilities of the systems designed to limit the hazards posed by the organism. 5.1.2. The use of concentrated aconitine without prior study or approval as a failsafe directly triggered a reactionary response from the organism, which led to the deaths of over 750 individuals. 5.1.3. The use of the contingency measure, while effective at pacifying the organism, was similarly employed without prior substantial testing or approval. This lack of communication from Anodyne regarding the specifics, theory of operation, and even existence of the artifacts, which are essential components within the contingency measure, directly led to the unsafe, high RPM operation, which fractured the mineral components of the contingency measure. 5.2.0. General Recommendations. 5.2.1. The CGR, with full support from the U.S. Department of the Interior, the U.S. Geological Survey, and the National Park Service, has made the discretionary recommendation to not pursue additional commercial development within or adjacent to the boundaries of the Permian Basin superorganism. 5.2.2. In the interest of continuing the present containment operations while also ensuring readiness in the event of a future geobiological action event, the CGR has developed a comprehensive program of monitoring and containment. This program is divided into a series of objectives intended to better mitigate the hazard presented by the existence of the Permian Basin superorganism. 5.2.3. Improve the communication of geobiological hazard science for use in decision and policy making. 1. Support the use of geobiological hazard science in risk reduction with engineering, environmental science, spiritual, and social sciences. 2. Improve understanding among venteriobiologists, engineers, and others of numerical simulation of organism ground activity as opposed to the use of empirical ground motion prediction equations. 3. Improve understanding of the benefits of early warning systems. 4. Educate about organism movement patterns and operational activity forecasts. 5.2.4. Advance basic knowledge of geobiological action event hazards and inform actions to reduce the risk of the organism becoming non-dormant. 1. Develop a new method to estimate stimulus response outcomes in interaction with the Permian Basin superorganism without reliance on expert opinion, proprietary computer models, or wholly mystic ritual methods without demonstrated patterns of reliability. 2. Educate and facilitate local containment capabilities to deal with fauna and other life forms which are native to the organism's interior anatomy. 3. Develop methods for production and administration of appropriate sedative measures to chemically induce a comatose state of inactivity in the organism. 4. Where it is absolutely necessary for personnel to descend into the organism, develop methods to reduce the possibility of individuals becoming trapped. 5. Establish a perimeter area surrounding the incident site to protect the health and safety of the public from additional fauna incursions or ejecta events. 5.3.0. Containment recommendations. 5.3.1. A thorough plan for containment of the organism has been devised by a joint containment task force comprised of geobiologists, venteriobiologists, seismologists, medical experts, engineers from various disciplines, land management specialists, ecclesiastical personnel, as well as representatives from private industry. This proposed containment procedure integrates a variety of strategies intended to prolong the dormancy of the Permian Basin superorganism, while simultaneously reducing the likelihood of a future geobiological action event. The task force has recommended the establishment of a 3-kilometer restricted access zone surrounding the entry orifice, defined by a reinforced and patrolled barrier. Signs and other warning devices should be installed to clearly inform the public of the hazards presented by the containment operations and the superorganism itself. Where possible, the task force has recommended that any material necessary for the containment operations be produced on-site so as to minimize logistic dependency on remote facilities. The recommended multi-strategy containment plan is outlined as follows. 1. All efforts should be made to maintain a steady introduction of high-potency anesthetic to the uppermost dermal anatomy of the organism. This is the foremost measure for reducing the capability of the superorganism to sense and perceive human activity. 2. At a similar volume to high-potency anesthetics, the introduction of inorganic phosphates directly into the muscles of the superorganism is an essential strategy designed to delay and fatigue the motor response of the organism. 3. Where possible, the introduction of acidic compounds into bone structures will further weaken the overall response capability of the superorganism in the event that other containment precautions fail. Special care should be taken to ensure that primary structural members of the organism's skeletal system are not weakened, however, as such a measure could potentially damage critical infrastructure. Note: as of revision 18.3 of this document, the Permian Basin Recovery and Superorganism Containment Corporation has been granted a temporary permit for the continued extraction of bone material and amniotic fluid ballast for research and limited commercial purposes. 4. The task force has recommended measures which would induce a state of mild hypoxia in the superorganism through the replacement of oxygen-rich air with carbon dioxide-rich air within the respiratory systems of the organism. In addition, by venting plant exhaust from the surface containment facility directly into the organism, this plan remains in compliance with standing EPA regulations on emissions within natural preserves. 5. The extraction of nutrient-rich material from within the superorganism's gastric systems is an additional preventative step recommended by the task force to weaken the response capability of the organism. In order to prevent a hunger response, the task force has recommended displacing the volume of nutrient-rich material with that of an inert material, such as gravel or rock. Note: as of revision 2.5 of this document, materials and objects harvested from the retrocognitive material gestation organs, aka gift gardens, will continue at a greatly reduced capacity for the exclusive purpose of research. All such objects shall be stored in a designated and secure off-site facility. 6.0.0 Conclusion. The CGR concludes its recommendations and report with broad advocacy for any such programs which aim to better prepare physical, as well as social and spiritual infrastructure for the inevitability of the Permian Basin superorganism emerging from dormancy and becoming completely active and ambulatory. The measures and methods described within these recommendations are temporary in their effectiveness, while representing the fullest extent of human capability to impact the Permian Basin superorganism. Future studies and capabilities may yield a greater degree of readiness in matters concerning the survivability of a societal encounter with an active and ambulatory Imanis Calassius, but is unrealistic to believe that mankind will be able to seriously damage or eliminate such an organism. Inhabitants of the Western Hemisphere, within the US and abroad, must come to understand the losses each and every one of us will face and how those impacts will harm the quality of life we enjoy in this unique part of the world. End of document. This document represents an executive overview of the now infamous July 2007 disaster, which permanently closed the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park. Though the initial hazard and containment response was praised by many for its quick and decisive action, many have criticized the government for continuing to allow the Permian Basin Recovery and Superorganism Containment Corporation, formerly Anodyne Incorporated, a commercial stake in the containment efforts.
Who sleeps only an hour and a half a night, a baby born with 2 faces, or a cyclops baby. Get comfortable. Here are the 10 most unusual babies that really exist. Here we go. In the village of Sunpora, located 40 kilometers east of New Delhi, a little girl was born on March 11, 2008. But the little lolly was born with a rather particular physique. Indeed, she was born with a serious malformation that manifested itself in a craniofacial duplication. The little girl had only one head, only one pair of ears, but she had 2 faces, with 2 noses, 2 pairs of lips and 2 pairs of eyes. Lolly could drink her milk with her 2 mouths and open or close her 4 eyes at the same time. An exceptional phenomenon. Despite her malformation, Lolly was like any other baby. The craniofacial duplication frequently leads to health complications, but the newborn seemed to lead a normal life and did not suffer from any pain or respiratory difficulties. Even if Lolly might suffer psychologically from her difference when she grows up, she is still a little girl like the others. She could make her difference a strength. Besides, the little girl with two faces became in a few weeks of life a real star in her village. So much so, that at her birth, she was considered as the reincarnation of a Hindu goddess, something that does not happen to all babies. Robin Odette and Kirk Hisco are from Refrew, Ontario and are the proud parents of little Ever Hisco. They live a simple, happy life like any ordinary family. But when Robin and Kirk get ready for bed at night,
every day I make around $10,000 and it's all online. It's actually not from real estate. If you're someone that's looking to get into real estate, let me educate you on a few things real quick. All right. Obviously, real estate can make you a lot of money. The problem with real estate, it's a long-term investment. It can cost a lot of money. It could be really problematic. Okay. What I do, it's real estate, but it's digital real estate. It's online digital assets that you own. That's like real estate in person, but it's online. Okay. These digital assets actually make me over $10,000 every single day. This is what we did in the past 30 days. We did over $300,000. Okay. And I'm not talking about doing affiliate marketing, Amazon, drop shipping, none of that stuff, no launches. This is
they know it's going to be an eventful night. Robin and Kirk hardly sleep all night because of their baby. The little Ever is not a child like the others. She suffers from a rare disease named Angelman. This pathology is the result of a genetic modification on the chromosome 15 of the brain. It manifests itself, among other things, by the fact that the patient only needs a few hours of sleep per night. You can imagine the suffering of the parents. And that's not all, as at 3 years old, the child is still too small to stay awake alone at night. One of them must absolutely stay awake with her. The parents are thus obliged to sleep in turn to be able to recover, and that is repeated every night, a true ordeal. Today the couple has started to get used to this new way of life, although the 3-year-old still does not sleep more than 4 hours a day. Today, the couple receives a lot of support from people who know their story, which helps them a lot to bear their problem. This little girl is called Nina. She is the daughter of Griem Warnell and Aga. The three of them lived in Poland and led a seemingly ordinary life. But 2 weeks after her birth, Nina suddenly stopped eating and gaining weight. So at 10 weeks of age she was taken to the hospital. It was there that she was diagnosed with a rare disease, bubble baby syndrome. Nina was born without an immune system. A disease that affects 1 in several 100,000 babies, most of whom, if left untreated, die within a year of birth. Nina's disorder is due to a defective gene in her enzyme adenosine deaminase. The role of adenosine deaminase is to destroy the toxic molecule in white blood cells, and without it, the toxins build up and kill the cells that fight the bacteria. Nina's case was rare. A simple kiss or a simple cold could kill her. No one would go near her, not even her parents, for fear that someone would pass on a virus or bacteria that her body could not fight. Fortunately for Nina, after much research, her parents heard about Professor Bobby Gaspar, an immunology expert who works at GOSH. He suggested a gene therapy that involves harvesting bone marrow cells that are given a functional version of the ADA gene and then injected back into the patient. Their alternative would have been to undergo a bone marrow transplant, a complex and risky operation that was likely to result in Nina's death. In April 2013, the little girl was finally able to receive her therapeutic treatment and spent several months in a sterile room before her condition improved. Today, Nina and her family have returned to Poland after moving to England for treatment. But they still go once a year to GOSH in England for routine checkups. The little girl goes to school, runs, falls, wallows and plays, just as a child of her age would. In Egypt, in the private hospital of the city of El Senbelawyne, a woman gave birth to a baby boy. But the little boy was not quite normal. Her child was born with only one eye in the middle of his forehead, a rare and impressive malformation called cyclopia. The abnormality that the newborn had was due to a bad development of the embryonic structure that was supposed to become the brain. The latter, which should normally separate into two parts, remained as it was, which led to the creation of a single orbital cavity instead of two cavities, and therefore of a single larger eye located in the center of the forehead. Cyclopia may be caused by a genetic factor, as well as being the result of the mother's exposure to a combination of treatments or radiation during pregnancy, which would have disrupted the development of her fetus. The photo of the baby with only one eye and no nose was published by the media and disturbed many internet users. Another pain that the poor mother endured by seeing the photo of her baby making the rounds of the web. Worse than that, she had to face the worst pain, that of saying goodbye to her baby since it died a few days later. Indeed, Babies born with such malformations have a very low chance of survival. In spite of an aftertaste of unfinished business, the arrival of this child will have made her stronger. The Fenner couple lives in the United States and their greatest desire was to have a child. So they gave birth to a little Luna. Unfortunately, Luna was born with a giant, congenital melanocytic nevus. This disease manifested itself in a large black spot that covered a good part of her face. It is actually a benign tumor. And the reason it was called giant is because in Luna's case, the black spot covered more than 10 centimeters of her face. Luna's parents had to fight for their daughter's return to a normal life. They opened an online fundraising campaign to collect donations so that little Luna could undergo surgery and thus regain a more or less ordinary appearance. Luna will have to undergo a total of 8 operations, and for this, the parents have taken her to Russia, where a Russian surgeon lives who had a revolutionary treatment for the little girl. A godsend for the parents, since shortly after Luna's birth, the young couple, still new to parenthood, had to face mocking looks and malicious criticism. Many said that their daughter looked like a monster, others were afraid of her and kept away from her thinking that she had a contagious disease. Today, the two parents have managed to have their little Luna operated on. The black spot has diminished considerably, but there are still a few more operations to do before she gets her face back to normal. They are happy and proud to see their daughter happy and fulfilled despite her particularity. And even if the spot disappears with the operations, if there is one thing that will not disappear no matter what the results are, it is the love they have for her. Paisley Morrison Johnson was born in South Dakota, USA. But when she was born, Paisley had a rare birth defect. She suffered from Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome, a disease that causes the overgrowth of certain organs, including the tongue. Thus, little Paisley was born with a tongue so large that she was unable to breathe on her own. Only operations could free her from this handicap. Paisley had to undergo a first operation to shrink her tongue, but it turned out to be a real failure because the muscle kept growing and hanging out of her mouth. And to be able to feed himself, the baby had to be fed by a gastric tube until he was 6 months old. Paisley then underwent a second surgery during which she had approximately 15 centimeters of muscle removed. Unfortunately, this operation is not the end of her worries, as in the future, Paisley could see abnormal growths in other parts of her body, still due to Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome. For now, at least the little girl has been able to smile again. She is breathing and eating normally, and even better, she is already saying her first words. In Alabama, USA, a little boy was born with the name Timothy Eli Thompson. But the newborn was not a child like the others. He suffered from a congenital malformation called Anodyne, which had not been detected during the ultrasound checkups that the mother underwent during her pregnancy. As a result, little Timothy was born without his nose. In addition to breathing difficulties, Timothy was also deprived of his olfactory system and his palate was also incomplete, in addition to the positioning of his brain which was lower than normal. These were serious complications that a simple plastic surgery could not solve. The young Timothy Eli first had to undergo a tracheotomy so that he could regain the ease.
What if I told you that instead of doing this, and this, you could be doing this to burn an extra 100
ease of breathing, and will later have to undergo another surgery for the reconstruction of his nasal cavity. An operation that turns out to be quite complex and therefore can only be considered at the end of his childhood. But in spite of his malformation, little Timothy Eli remains, like all babies, an adorable little fellow full of life. In 2017, in Bihar, a state in northeast India, a 28-year-old woman was expecting a child. She was happy and hopeful because the arrival of her child was going to be a new and joyful stage in her life. On the day she wanted to give birth, she went to the government hospital in Patna district. But the young mother, who was eager to meet her child, was devastated when she heard the shocking news of the genetic disease with which her baby was born. The baby looked like a strange creature rather than a human being because of the disease called harlequin ichthyosis. The latter is a very rare and serious genetic disease that mainly affects the skin, making it thicker and harder. Affected babies usually have their bodies encased in a kind of armor of dense white skin patches, separated by deep crevices that can crack and alter facial features, denaturing them and depriving them of any human appearance. Added to this, a series of other complications such as skin tightening around the eyes and mouth, forcing the eyelids and lips to turn over and revealing red linings. The chest and abdomen may be severely constricted by the tightness of the skin, making breathing difficult. The skull and face may become deformed. The nose may be absent. The ears may be missing or welded to the head by the skin. The joints lack movement, the fingers may be incomplete. Worse, the babies may be at high risk of dehydration and become extremely sensitive to temperature changes due to their hard skin. Not to mention the ordinary complications that occur with premature delivery, since these babies are all born prematurely. The mother said she was devastated by the delivery. She was ready to give her baby a lot of love, but refused to even hold and breastfeed him. She said that this birth was a curse, especially since when the news spread in the district of Patna, people shocked by the arrival of such a strange baby, nicknamed it, the demon baby, which only added to her pain. Let's hope that with time, this mother's heart will soften and she will learn to love her little one despite his difference, because she remains after all a mother, and a mother loves unconditionally. So what do you think of these 10 unusual babies? Have you ever had the opportunity to see a baby like no other? Tell us about it in the comments. And by the way, if you like this video, don't forget to give us a like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to receive all the notifications and not miss anything of our next contents.
When God created the light and placed the light as suns and stars into the cosmos, the earth cried to God and asked for her share. And God heard the cry of earth and sent all his angels. They cast their light into the earth, and it was turned into crystals and gems.
There are many legends and fairy tales about precious gems and crystals. We have all grown up with them. The worlds of our tales are filled with treasure, shrouded in adventure and danger, guarded by dwarfs and dragons. They beckon the able to rise them from the depth of the earth. Princes of mighty empires wear sparkling gems in their crowns and scepters as symbols of their power. The myth of Atlantis awakens the memory of the magical powers of giant crystals. Yet the story that brought me onto the trail of these gems is new. It finished with a very strange sentence. We need to become crystalline from within. Even though intuitively and poetically I understood this sentence, it kept going through my head. Something was different about this sentence. It was not because of history or myth, but because it pointed towards a mission for humanity's future. And so, I decided to explore the relationship between humans and crystals.
Gems and crystals have always been valuable companions. fascinating people through their beauty and their energetic properties. The relationship between humans and gemstones certainly dates back a few millennia. The oldest artifacts that prove this are amber, well over 10,000 years old, that have been engraved. So obviously, jewelry was made out of it. It was not just found like that. If we look into the different cultures, be it the shamanic, spiritual, or even the Christian and Islamic traditions, in whatever traditions, we always find crystals in each of these cultures. They were certainly used in cults even then. They have been found as burial objects, and only certain things were even added to the graves. I would say it really started first with precious stones, and later with magical stones, healing stones, when the first high civilizations arose. So to make a rough classification of the different eras in which gems have played a role, one might say that it began in the Stone Age. I would even call that the archaic phase, where people still had to trust their intuition. They did not have science in the modern sense, so instead they used their life experience. I think people first experienced then that there was more to these stones than just their beauty and outer form. I think this archaic experience certainly led to the first applications as healing stones. We can still observe that today. Stone Age cultures, primitive peoples still exist. There you can see how they use stones, some as healing stones, simply because of what these people can perceive directly, because they can, to a certain extent, communicate with the stones. The subsequent period I would call the mythological era, where civilizations arose, such as in India and Sumer, where the stones were given a place in the cosmology, or were assigned to the planets, signs of the zodiac, or the gods. And then, starting with ancient Greece, I would call the natural studies phase, where stones were explored, where they come from, where they played a role as ores and as source materials. That would be the period starting with the Greeks, the Romans, and the early Middle Ages. Then came Arabia, the medical phase, during which stones were made into medicines. They were ground and processed alchemically so that minerals were made into drugs. Even then, that has continued until today, resulting in homeopathy and spagyrics, which use the traditional alchemical recipes. Then came the scientific phase, with the emergence of mineralogy and geology in the last 300 years. The medicinal uses fell into the background because you could not explain how stones work in that way. And then in the 20th century, the esoteric phase came, when the circles of anthroposophy, the medicine of Hildegard of Bingen, and modern esotericism sparked an interest in the healing properties of stones again. Today, we have a synthesis of all these different phases. They have not replaced each other, but each subsequent one has added to the others. The archaic has remained just as the mythological, the natural studies, the scientific, and now also the esoteric. Today, we have the opportunity to draw from all of these sources and see what can be applied and what works in practice.
Today, ever more people are interested in precious gems. Increased prosperity and a seductively large supply of gems from all over the world are not the only reason for this.
Sicherlich in der modernen Zeit, und da kann man.
Certainly in modern times, the last 25 years in particular, many people have turned to the energetic qualities of stones. More and more people out there have discovered stones for themselves. They experience something like a calling by the stones. They are attracted by certain forms of stones.
Digital marketer, flooded by an ocean of advertising channels? It's time to try Taboola native ads. You've tried social, search. It's time you don't go with the flow and discover Taboola native ads. Be present on the world's most credible websites. Reach up to 500 million daily active users. Increase your performance and ROI. Manage campaigns with full transparency. Taboola. Start now.
Imagine this scenario. You buy a little known cryptocurrency at $2.82 from a major exchange. The coin surges to $26.50 per coin, handing you a 9-fold gain. Sounds pretty good, right? But what if this happened instead? You buy the same cryptocurrency, but this time you buy it using a perfectly legitimate backdoor method for just 48 cents before the coin is listed on the major exchange. Instead of making only 9 times your money, you make 55 times your money. Is this really possible, or is it just a pipe dream? Well, if you know where to look and you have some money you can afford to risk, I assure you this is very possible, and I'll show you how it's done. My name is Martin Weiss, and I'm the founder of Weiss Ratings, America's #1 independent rating agency and the world's only financial rating agency that grades cryptocurrencies. So in our work, we come across all sorts of strange, off-the-wall, but legitimate ways to generate outsized returns from cryptocurrency markets. This is one of those strange but legitimate ways. It involves what I call a hidden crypto exchange, a perfectly legal, perfectly reasonable method for buying undiscovered cryptos at far better prices before they're listed on the major exchanges. It kind of reminds me of pre-IPO investments in the traditional financial market. The difference is, with this method in cryptocurrencies, even average investors can participate. You don't have to be an accredited investor, nor do you need any special connections. And the best part is that you can tap into this backdoor method to find coins selling for mere pennies that have the potential for truly outsized gains. One of the examples I cite in my latest presentation is the one that surged 55 times. Another shot up 125 times, and still another skyrocketed a mind-boggling 1,250 times in just 3 months. That's a gain of 125,000%. Now, of course, that's an extreme example, so don't expect to make that much money. But even if you can make only 1/10 this much, it's an exceptional opportunity. And from everything we can see, there are multiple exceptional opportunities still available. I tell you all about them and how to tap into this hidden crypto exchange in my video presentation. Simply click the button below to watch it now for free, while it's still available online. I think this will open your eyes to enormous possibilities. And if you think you've missed the boat in the crypto market, you'll see why this boat has barely left the dock. Take a look for yourself by clicking the button below right now.
Or certain crystals, and they like to have them as a companion.
Der Steine von bestimmten Kristallen gerufen werden und die gerne als Begleiter bei sich haben.
Ich denke, durch gerade die
I think the industrialization and the technologization of the last century increased our rational and scientific thinking. This cut the mystical, the intimate connection to stones. But over the last 30 or 40 years, we find, especially in Europe, but also worldwide, a remembering, a searching, as if the soul of the world is remembering that there is an important store of knowledge and healing that went missing, that needs to be recovered. Influences are coming from all directions.
Den es gilt wieder zu bergen und es kommen Einflüsse aus allen Richtungen zum Tragen.
Es ist ja so, dass viele Menschen mehr und mehr
Many people would like to take responsibility for themselves in terms of their own development and their health. People are looking for ways to naturally strengthen their inner balance and restore it.
nach Möglichkeiten suchen, auf ganz natürlichem Wege innere Balance zu stärken und wiederherzustellen. Viele Menschen fühlen sich einfach auch durch die Art der
Many people also find modern medicine too overwhelming and not supportive. People are looking for opportunities for other ways. One of the ways they find is using the forces of rock crystals and gems.
sozusagen begegnet, ist die Anwendungsform der Kräfte von Bergkristallen, der Kräfte von Edelsteinen im Allgemeinen.
Dazu, denke ich, kommt die Sehnsucht.
There is a longing for the soul in nature. Our model of science has told us that it is an illusion what shamans, Indians, primitive people, and our ancestors believed and lived, namely that each tree has a soul, every lake, every rock. The anonymity that has been instilled in us has made our life become cold and hard. We have no relationship to other beings because we no longer believe that they exist. I think the time has come for all of us because we only have one path of development available to us now, namely the spiritual one. We want to know why, how, where. The material world cannot satisfy us anymore. And now the movement that asks this question has grown very big. Today we have developed with our thinking, but also through science, a much larger consciousness. We also need this to comprehend the spiritual concepts at all.
Die spirituellen Konzepte überhaupt fassen zu können. Natürlich gab es in jeder Kultur.
Of course, there were teachings in every culture that had answers for small groups of specialized intelligent people. Today it is about the whole world wants answers.
But let's look at the gems themselves. Under intense pressure, deep down into the earth, in a process lasting millions of years, elements are transformed into objects of pure beauty, pure form, and pure light, like ambassadors of eternity.
Ja, wie alt die Edelsteine sind, kann eigentlich kein Mensch.
Nobody can say exactly how old gemstones are actually. They are much older than what we know. Scientists are talking about 50 to 500 million years of age for individual stones. The most important and interesting thing is to just realize that we are dealing with the oldest things, one might say, on this world. Spiritually speaking, with the most ancient beings who are here on Earth, who are still in their original body, which is not destructible, which does not decay.
Immer noch in ihrem ursprünglichen Körper sich befinden, der nicht verwüstlich ist, der nicht vergeht. Vom mineralogischen Standpunkt aus betrachtet ist die Entstehung.
From the mineralogical point of view, the formation of quartz crystals is not so unlike to us humans. And it is amazing when going through the relevant literature how metaphysical it reads. It begins at conception, one can say, in a crevice, in a cavity in the rock, in the mountains. It is often tension joints that have been dragged into a vacuole. Steaming hydrothermal fumes, a solution that is highly energetic, pressurized, and heated and enriched with minerals, splits water into hydrogen and oxygen, and the oxygen combines with the silica.
Da spaltet sich das Wasser in Wasserstoff und Sauerstoff und der Sauerstoff verbindet sich mit der Kieselsäure, mit dem Silizium, die aus dem Gestein herausgelöst.
The silicon that has been removed from the rock into the nutrient solution and forms small seedlings, just like the first cell of life grows from a fertilized egg. The resulting seedlings in this tension joint form as a precipitate and nest in the outer shell of this vacuole, just as in a womb, like a fertilized egg in humans.
Wie eine befruchtete Eizelle, die es beim Menschen auch vollbringt. Fällt jetzt zum Beispiel solch ein Keimling,
If such a seedling falls onto the right culture medium in this way, then it automatically continues to grow like this. Then that determines its direction of growth and represents something of a genetic trait which leads it.
im Sinne da, nach der er sich weiter richtet.
Austin Bank. We've been a community bank for over 100 years. We've never been more proud to be a part of this community.
It could be considered sacrilege to mine these precious stones, to cut them from the mother lode to which they were connected for eons. Their wonderful beauty, though, is not fully revealed until they reach the sunlight. It is often by coincidence, when water and erosion bring gems to the surface, that a deposit is found. Sometimes they are discovered while mining for ores or stones. Michael Vogt is a geologist, explorer and expert not only for precious stones. We will accompany him to a deposit in the middle of a forest where he retrieves the stones from near the surface.
Der Ort, zu dem wir jetzt fahren, liegt mitten im Wald.
The place to which we're now going is located in the woods. It was once a quarry. Above it and below it are layers of plaster and celestine.
Von Gips und Celestin. Edelsteine können auf unterschiedlichste Art und Weise an die Erdoberfläche gelangen.
Gems can get to the surface in various ways. On one hand, by weathering and erosion, then also by landslides when a mountain breaks away.
Bei Verwitterung hat man natürlich auch häufig dann
Weathering also often reveals the gems on the surface that are very, very hard and have separated from the host rock, which has eroded away. This means that you can collect the gems and identify a deposit in this way. Furthermore, gems accumulate mainly in rivers.
Sammeln sich natürlich die Edelsteine in Flüssen hauptsächlich. Die Entstehung der Edelsteine findet statt.
The creation of the gems is continuously occurring, all the time, during the various geological activities in the Earth's crust. You have to examine closely how is the gem formed, and then you look at the surrounding rock. And then you can, of course, draw conclusions on the age. You could be off by 1 year or 100,000 years, though.
Natürlich niemals genau etwas sagen kann. Wenn in einem Drusenraum, in einem großen Drusenraum Mineral.
If mineralized water exists in a certain geode, and this compacted rock, which contains this geode, when it cools down slowly, if during in a period of 50 to 100,000 years, it cools down by 1 degree, and water under pressure can indeed be several hundred degrees hot, you can imagine how long it must cool down to be really cold afterwards. The crystals grow within a certain range, so you can already guess that the growth could have taken hundreds of thousands to millions of years.
Hunderttausende bis Millionen Jahre gedauert haben könnte. Hier Übergangsschicht quasi.
Here is the transition layer of the Jurassic to the Cretaceous. Above these rocks, there are these sulfate-containing layers, which we can't see now, of course, because it's covered. Let's suppose we wanted to expose them. Then we would have to work for hours to days, because everything is accumulated here and falling down. I guess you would have to dig at least 2 to 3 meters.
Da müsste man mindestens sich 2 bis 3 Meter reinarbeiten.
The mystical aura of the autumn forest and the strange, unreal sound of hammers and picks through the fog remind me of a treasure hunt as in a fairy tale from childhood. For a moment, I worry we might awaken the spirit of the mountain. Even in its raw, unpolished form, a crystal is full of beauty. Its full beauty is only released by human hand, though. The art of cutting and polishing gems requires mastery and love for this special material. A special sense for its potential is what turns a raw stone into a work of art. the traditional gemstone cutting workshop of Ernesto Biel in Hunsrück is one of the last of its kind in Germany. Modern, brightly lit workshops do not have this charm anymore, even though the work there has become easier and cleaner. Michael Giger's mission in life is to explore the inner potential of stones. He has studied crystals and their effect on humans for 30 years. The modern study of the healing properties of crystals in Germany is mostly due to his work.
Die moderne Steinheilkunde können wir zum einen mal entwicklungsgeschichtlich.
We can examine the development of modern crystal healing therapy. Today, so many different sources, scientific as well as spiritual, are available. This has allowed crystal healing medicine to develop in the last 30 years in ways that were previously not possible, in ways that combine different fields of knowledge, not just examining scientifically or spiritually, but in a holistic way that benefits humans. Modern crystal healing has taken very different paths worldwide. The starting point clearly was the United States. Crystal healing was only revived because Indian knowledge was passed on to white people. It was authors like Katrina Raphael, Jane Ann Dow, and Dara Sarai Chokran who all learned from the shamans and have then translated it into our Western perspective. So there is a branch that is based on tradition, that has been passed down for centuries. Channeled knowledge was added to this pretty quickly, both in the US and to some extent in Europe. But the focus here was the United States. This came, for example, from Garudas, who has written about gem elixirs and where knowledge was drawn directly from spiritual sources. I personally do not do it, so I cannot say much about that. But interestingly enough, in the case of Garudas, it was applicable, so that he has brought new things that have turned out to be true.
Here in
Europe, you would actually have to say, in German-speaking countries, we have gone a different way, because we had homeopathy as our model. The different fields have fertilized each other. You naturally look at what others are doing, what knowledge others have gained. Ultimately, what works well and can be repeated determines what is used, whether it comes from traditional sources, from channeling, or if it comes from our more analytical work. I am also very pleased to say that no boundaries were created, but that there was communication, mutual fertilization, and respect for each other's method for the sake of results. You could say quite simply, who heals is right. Analytical crystal healing is the attempt to bring all the different things in an orderly system. Therefore, we have taken the stones themselves as a reference point. their origin, their structure, their color, their minerals, and tried to look what effects go back to what origin. If stones with similar color have a similar effect, then it must have something to do with the color. Or if stones with similar structure have a similar effect, it must have something to do with the structure. It was not certain from the beginning that it would work. It was an attempt to organize things by their effect and to investigate, but it has been confirmed greatly in practice. Because analytical crystal healing has thus become a system that has more order than, for example, homeopathy or other systems. You don't have to memorize the therapeutic properties for individual stones and only need to understand the basics. And you could then deduce from the basics which effect the stone could have. I purposely say could because you can never predict with certainty. There are basically 4 major factors that have a role in the effect of stones. The color, of course, is the most obvious factor, and that colors have an effect is also well known. Also, every element, every mineral brings its own effect. Iron brings up completely different qualities in a stone than magnesium or calcium. The third aspect is the structure of a stone, how the pieces are arranged and what forms they get as crystals. And the fourth element is the process of creation. I think it's understandable that a volcanically formed rock has a completely different power than a stone that was formed by weathering and deposition. All 4 of these factors, on the one hand, determine the effect of the stone, what it can be used for, and also to which people it fits best. We humans are indeed individuals, and not everyone responds to a stone in exactly the same way. With these 4 factors, we can determine the right stone for the person in a very specific situation.
The effects of crystals are not only explained by their specific properties. Humans, with all their complexity, constitution, ability to resonate, and their entire bodily, mental, and emotional being, also always determine the kind of influence a crystal has and which process it will support.
Stones will affect people at all levels. Funnily enough, 20 years ago, when we started to do research with stones, there were really 2 camps, because there were people who said stones are matter, so therefore they only affect the body. The others said, wait a minute, stones work energetically, so that can really only work on the mental and spiritual levels. From our own observations in research groups and also in natural medicine practice, we can say that all levels are affected. Humans are not just their physical bodies, but surrounding and penetrating them are different energetic layers. We can call them energy bodies. That means there is an energy body. It is called the etheric body, which extends 5 to 10 centimeters beyond the physical body. This etheric body is like a blueprint.
Und dieser ätherische Körper ist wie eine Blaupause. Das heißt, all the
organs that we have in the physical body, we can also find in the etheric body. The ethereal body supplies the physical body with vital forces. Additionally, humans have as spirit soul essence an emotional expression, an emotional body.
Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus, now bundled together. The greatest stories and characters, and tons
body, one can say, because it is also an energy field, which can be felt by people who have subtle perception.
Für Menschen, die feinstoffliche Wahrnehmung haben. Und hat einen mentalen.
And humans have a mental body, that is, a body of thought that goes beyond the emotional body. Some spiritual traditions speak sometimes of other spiritual bodies, which I do not want to explain in detail now.
Die ich jetzt aber nicht im Einzelnen weiter erläutern will.
The model of layers, which we find indicated in so many books, do not only correspond to the layers of this energy body, but we have to imagine it as more pervasive. The emotional body is around us and in us as well, and it has a major center in our physical body, which is in the thymus.
Und das ist im Bereich der Thymusdrüse.
And these bodies are part of our everyday life. We constantly think, we perceive things, we have our emotions that we spread around us. We have our physical vitality, and this body, or through these fields, we also communicate and interact with the environment. That is why you can feel the moods of others or catch the thoughts of others. And of course, all these areas can also interact with stones, because the stones have these fields too. The various factors of stones, color, origin, structure, minerals, all together determine the information of the stone, so to speak. And this information is now being transferred to us, basically in two ways. Firstly, every stone has a radiation. It absorbs energy and heat and releases the energy received at certain frequencies again, which can then act as a carrier wave for this information, similar to radio stations. And secondly, each stone, everything basically, vibrates when it is heated, and these vibrations produce sound waves.
Das heißt, wir müssen uns das etwa so.
That is, we have to imagine that such a crystal is steadily clocked at a certain frequency. If I bring this crystal now into my energy field, it synchronizes the vibration of my energy field. We cannot change it. He is constantly evenly clocked, says science, but our electromagnetic field adapts to its frequency.
In uns kommen
These effects or information arrive in us in a way that we react to it. What we experience as effect is actually our response to the information. So you could say, because we perceive these things, they are effective in us. That also means stones don't give energy. They are not batteries from which you get unlimited power. They only give an impulse, like an idea or an intention. We carry out this impulse with our own life energy. It is always through our own strength that it comes into motion and causes an effect. A stone can act on the spiritual level. It suddenly brings back memories. It helps us take perspectives that we have long forgotten. It helps remember your goals in life again. It may work on the emotional level to release feelings. It can work on the mental level, so thoughts are really changed, and of course there are many physical effects.
Es können aber auch Erinnerungen an frühere Leben kommen.
It can also bring memories of past lives when they have an important message for us. It can happen just as visions of the future that later actually occur, so that one finds that the effect of the stones have significantly strengthened our spiritual potential. So the effect can be very, very different. You should always be aware subtle healing does not work with the principle of pleasure. It can be enjoyable, it can be wonderful and ecstatic, but it can also be very uncomfortable and painful. If old pain, old traumas need to come up again in order to get free. Consequently, one should not judge the effect by whether it was pleasant or unpleasant, but you should reflect on how you are afterward.
Reflektieren, wie geht es mir hinterher?
Die feinfühligen Erfahrungen des Menschen lassen sich ganz schön.
The sensitive human experiences can be quite difficult to put into words, because the language with which we express ourselves, the language that we have learned, offers too few possibilities. If you ask an Eskimo about snow or ice, then you will notice that they have 50 words for snow and even more for ice. This is part of their world, their perception, where they have developed precise terminology. We are only beginning to be interested and open to subtle levels again. We do not have the exact terminology. This needs to be developed.
Noch nicht. Die müssen sich erst entwickeln.
Zu dem immer wieder verwendeten Begriff der
About the repeatedly used term of subtle energies that many therapists and crystal healers use. To again respond to this, you should be aware this term is indeed somewhat unscientific, which we will now explain with scientific words. There the difficulty already starts.
mit wissenschaftlichen Worten erklären wollen. Hier fängt die Schwierigkeit ja schon an.
Menschen, die bioenergetisch arbeiten.
People working bioenergetically use the term energy in the sense of life energy. This is a slightly different concept than the physical and technical term. Energy in physics is always something that is measured quantitatively and basically shows how much work is being done or can be. The energy of life has something to do with this physical energy term. It is more about energy structures, or rather, the free flow of energy, or the other way around, about blockages in the flow of energy in a living system. So this energy term is more about order, structure, flow, and movement.
Auf Struktur und auf Fluss, Bewegung ausgerichteter Energiebegriff.
Quartz crystals, especially rock crystals, are somewhat special amongst the family of crystals. Their purity and their specific elementary and physical properties distinguish them from other minerals, not only in experience, but also in their possibility of application.
The word crystal is often misunderstood and misrepresented. It is used mostly for rock crystal. The word crystal describes nothing more than a geometrically growing form. A geometrically growing form expresses itself mathematically. For example,
Customize and save with Liberty Mutual. Take 96.
Libbity bibbity.
Cut!
in a crystal, the opposite surfaces are always parallel. There are mathematical rules that prove that a crystal from the smallest molecule up to full-grown meter-sized crystals follow the same geometric pattern. In mineralogy, this is called a crystal lattice structure. Each crystal has a growth axis, which is the so-called C-axis. The crystal is composed of smaller tetrahedrons, that is, silicon and oxygen formed in the shape of the tetrahedron, which is a four-sided pyramid.
Formen sich in diese Form, das ist ein Tetraeder, eine vierseitige Pyramide. Und diese Tetraeder setzen
and millions of these tetrahedrons form a spiral shape and go in tunnels through the crystal to the tip of the crystal. The energy flows along these tunnels in rock crystal.
Entlang dieser Tunnel fließt im Bergkristall die Energie.
Large computer companies that have researched crystals for many years have proven that this crystal lattice structure actually has a similar function as an antenna. Hewlett-Packard, ITT, Schaub-Lawrence, all the big computer companies did years of crystal research, where they found, for example, that crystals have an electrical and optical axis, which is often or usually in the direction of their growth form, that is, in the direction of its tip. A grown crystal has an antenna function, and thus a capability of transmitting and receiving energy pulses, that a fragment of a mineral, or a tumble-polished stone, or a non-crystalline formed mineral does not have.
Mineral eben nicht aufweist.
Das heißt, die innere Struktur des Bergkristalls, der ist
Concerning the internal structure of the rock crystal, that is, for example, piezoelectric, which means pressure creates a primary electric field around the crystal. The special property of the rock crystal is the internal arrangement, the molecular structure. This structure, the way the molecules are arranged in rock crystal, creates an optimal flow of information and energy.
diesen optimalen Fluss an Energie und Informationsübertragung.
Let us again return to the computers. As I said, no computer today could function anymore without quartz chips. No traffic lights, no cars, no aircraft. Our entire technology depends on the quartz technology. One should therefore actually talk about the crystal age in which we live, in the way as in the Iron Age, when everything was dependent upon iron.
Wir leben ja im sogenannten Informationszeitalter.
We live in what we call the information age, and that includes that we are aware on several levels of the dynamics of information, what it does in people. Spiritually, we become more conscious of the thought forms we send out, including feelings and emotions, that these have a direct impact on our own energetic being, but also on the condition of others.
Auf unser eigenes energetisches Befinden, aber genauso auch das Befinden anderer Menschen.
Nun, die Quarzchips machen vereinfacht.
Well, to put it simply, the quartz chips do nothing other than bundle information and enhance the clocking and transmission of it. This is the main capability of quartz. And that's what all kinds of healers make use of as healing tools.
Mit Quarzen als Heilungswerkzeuge zu nutzen.
Der Kristall als solches hat die
As such, crystal has the property to emit energy and to receive it. It is the sender and the receiver. It has the capacity to transport energy from one level to another. That is, if I put thought energy and thought pulses into a crystal, then it brings them into a measurable electromagnetic spectrum.
Elektromagnetisches Spektrum hinein.
The practical work with such sensitive tools requires a lot of knowledge, attention, and respect. Lukas Kohlweg is an energy worker. His purpose is to harmonize the energy body of humans. His futuristic instruments and installations combine specifically made rock crystals arranged in special patterns into complex systems. These support his work on the energy body of humans.
Ich verwende Kristalle hauptsächlich in Energie.
I use crystals mainly in energy healing devices, in crystal healing devices that are designed for different functions. The healing table is to give someone a full body treatment. The various healing devices allow one to connect to the soul and to put one's karmic processes into motion, or to balance the chakras, or to control the energetic system of the glands. These are used as needed.
Vorhanden sind und die werden je nach Bedarf eingesetzt. Wir haben ja schon erläutert, dass
We have already explained that crystals, due to their structure, attract and release energy. That is, when I connect the crystals together in certain layouts and patterns, then I can create energy fields. And if I possess the knowledge of the form, then I can connect the shapes together, and therefore interconnect certain energy functions. Depending on the pattern, there is an energizing, which can then either be used to release energy, if someone wants to let go of something, or to introduce energy.
Energie rauszunehmen, weil der Mensch das loslassen will, oder Energie einzuleiten. Und zum Zweiten kann ich sie natürlich auch schleifen.
And secondly, I can cut them, of course. I can facet them and therefore let them radiate energy very specifically. I can pulse them. They can produce a soft mist. Depending on what therapy I have in mind or what kind of problem I have, then I have to decide what I need to do. Do I need a sharp beam now because I have to get through something? Or do I need a fog because I want to be caressed? Or do I need a pulsation because I need to stimulate something to make it work again? These are the important possibilities of crystals. Possibilities of crystals, namely the decision of how I use them, and that is also the knowledge that is inside the healing devices.
Das Prinzip des energetischen Heilens beruht darauf,
The principle of energy healing is based on the fact that we can change the energies in the body. We cannot change the past, but we can change how we handle the energy of our experiences. And working with energy requires, if you now want to use them for energy balancing, or indeed for development, that we begin to control our reactions and that we take our behavior into our own hands.
unser Verhalten selbst in die Hand zu nehmen.
Donald Freeman Yaskola is an international trainer for working with Vogel Cut Crystals. These crystals distinguish themselves through the exclusive purity and very precise cut. Their facets with precisely calculated angles greatly enhance their national ability to receive, store, and release information.
Das Wissen, was zu mir gekommen
The knowledge, what has come through to me about rock crystal, is based mostly on the findings of an American scientist and mystic, and his name was Marcel Vogel. Marcel Vogel was someone who worked for 27 years at IBM, who did a lot of liquid crystal research, and who was spiritually inclined and mystical. He brought together spiritual and scientific knowledge in a unique way and explained the properties of rock crystal in detail.
und hat die Eigenschaften des Bergkristalls detailliert erklärt. Der Marcel Vogel hat eine besondere Art der Kristalle.
Marcel Vogel developed a special type of crystals. I want to show such a crystal that has been cut into this form, unlike a conventional uncut crystal. The properties of the rock crystal are optimized in a so-called Vogel Cut Crystal.
Des Bergkristalls sind in einem sogenannten Vogel Cut Kristall optimiert. Der Bergkristall als Sender und Empfänger.
The rock crystal as transmitter and receiver, the way it comes out of the earth, is like a radio signal, which has not been adjusted properly. There is a great addition of noise, and the actual information signal cannot be accurately transferred. To offset this disadvantage, he has developed the so-called Vogel Cut Crystals. They are cut in such a way that they make the transfer of a precise signal possible. They are made so that they send out a coherent signal, that is an equally oscillating electrical impulse, and that makes them unique in their use for healing work.
Und das macht sie in ihren Möglichkeiten der Heilarbeit einzigartig. Dieser Bergkristall ist in einer
This rock crystal has been cut into an 8-sided form, and it has been discovered that the more sides, the more facets such a crystal has, the stronger the spin of energy and inner reflection, and the more stronger the output of energy is from such a crystal.
die aus so einem Kristall kommen. Vogel Cut Kristalle unterscheiden sich von normalen Bergkristallen.
Vogel Cut crystals are different from normal rhinestones or most polished crystals in that they are cut exactly and precisely in their angles. They are cut along the growth axis, and they must be, and that makes a Vogel Cut crystal in exact resonance to the vibration of water. Water has a specific frequency as measured on a radionics device. The rock crystal is cut so that it comes into the same frequency. If both match exactly, it is called a Vogel Cut crystal. There are only 2 grinders in the world who have the ability to do that. Many of the crystals which you can find on markets or at gemstone dealers that imitate this form have nothing to do with a Vogel Cut crystal, you need to know. This is a very special, one might say, highly tuned tool for therapists or for people who do energy work.
Oder für Menschen, die Energiearbeit machen. Der ursprüngliche Vogel Cut Kristall hatte 4 Seiten. Inzwischen
The original Vogel Cut crystals had 4 sides. Now there are Vogel Cut crystal variations with more facets, 6, 8, 12, or odd numbers. The higher the number of facets, the greater the energy is reflected in the crystal itself and amplified. That does not mean that the more facets, the better the crystal. But each crystal has its own special preferred application. Anyway, it is a fallacy in male thinking to always think the stronger the better. Especially when working with subtle energies, one learns very quickly that a precise but also gentle pulse with the correct information vibration is much more effective than any strong, overwhelming energy.
Als irgendwelche starken, überwältigenden Energien. Die Erkenntnisse, die zum Beispiel Marcel Vogel über die Bergkristalle
The findings that, for example, were formulated by Marcel Vogel on quartz crystals and their possible application in relation to the structuring of water or the like are all based on the findings and development that goes with the information age. One of the approaches to work with the crystal is to use its capacity similar to how we use computers, though perhaps with a little more dedication. And that's the interesting thing about the crystal, that it calls and asks us also to very respectfully deal with all levels of creation.
Sehr respektvoll mit allen Ebenen der Schöpfung umzugehen.
If gems and crystals have such an effect on the human energy body, namely that their vibrational quality and the energy of intention can be transferred as information to a living being.
Meet EditorX, the world's most advanced website design platform.
Then the question arises if this effect can be proven or even measured.
The effects of stones are directly detectable. There are, for example, biofeedback devices that show immediately how through the effects of a stone changes in the body appear.
Dieses Biofeedback-Gerät funktioniert.
This biofeedback device works with a skin resistance measurement. Due to the specific skin resistance measurement, values are obtained, which are stored in the computer. The device displays the energy or aura image of the most important organs that are also found in the reflex zones of the hand, visible on this graphic. All of this is much inspired by traditional Chinese medicine.
Und das Ganze lehnt sich stark an traditionelle chinesische Medizin. Also eine Messung läuft folgendermaßen ab.
A measurement procedure is as follows. The subject places his hand on a board with 40 pins. At first, the current state of the person is measured. Then we analyze the measurement.
Dann analysiert man die Messung. Der zweite Schritt wäre, dass man aufgrund der
The second step would be to select a particular stone based on the analysis and place it in this person's hand. The moment when the stone touches the skin, the picture changes.
das Bild. Der Ist-Zustand hat sich
The person's state has changed considerably, as can be seen here. There is a lot more energy in the body now, here at the bottom of the graphic, the knee, the elbow, and so forth. Previously, it was relatively low.
vorher schon relativ reduziert. Das ist sozusagen der Beweis, dass
This is the evidence that due to the characteristics of the stone, the condition of individual organs, or possibly the mood of the whole person, the whole body changes.
der ganzen Person, des ganzen Körpers ändert. Eine ganz wichtige Aussage der traditionellen
A
chinesischen
very important statement of traditional Chinese medicine is that every disease has a spiritual cause. This has been confirmed in a very, very large number of measurements. If, for example, the energy or aura picture changes and only turquoise, green, and blue colors are shown, then you can assume that everything has changed for the better.
alles zum Positiven verändert hat.
Die Kunst an den
The art to find the right stone has remained an art. This is not only possible with methods, and instruments can only be a tool. Ultimately, this requires more know-how and consciousness of the user.
An extensive experimental setup is needed to measure the field changes that occur by installing crystal energy devices. The biophysicist Dr. Walter Medinger has been researching the effect of electromagnetic fields on humans for many years. The instruments he has built specifically for this purpose are able to measure very fine electromagnetic fields.
We have fetched the technician to find out what effects magnetic frequencies have on the human system. That was the reason why we brought the technician, to see if it's measurable.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? Where are you? We got some work to do now. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now.
Humans can also be measured, and also to read from the data collected what crystals do and how and in which direction we can investigate further. I have used a grid method for measuring the magnetic flux density. This is the size in which you usually measure the strength of a magnetic field. The measurement is made for the vertical component of the magnetic field. The goal is not to capture the full magnitude of the field, in all three directions, but the structure of the field. Therefore, the measurement in one direction, because the measurement values then change when the magnetic field changes direction, even if it maintains its strength, its total field intensity. The device which is used for such measurements is called a Tesla meter. A Tesla is namely the unit of magnetic flux density. This is a very large unit. We usually measure in microtesla, because the strength of the natural magnetic field in the direction of measurement in Central Europe is about 40 microtesla. The value fluctuations and the natural variations of the geomagnetic field are in the range of tenths of microtesla. If we can detect effects that go significantly higher, then we say they are significant.
Können wir signifikante Effekte?
If we can see significant effects, then we can show changes in the structure of the magnetic field on the basis of these fine readings. The total energy of the magnetic field remains approximately the same, but it is distributed differently. That's what our measurements should show in this case, and what would be enough to prove a healing effect in the sense of life energy.
Zu belegen. Bei diesem Versuch diente die Magnetfeldmessung.
In this experiment, the magnetic field measurement was used as a tool to determine whether the healing table, especially when activated by a healer, has changed the field somewhat. The magnetic field is indeed primarily a field of order, so with this field, we have the best chances of getting physical, objective evidence of such changes.
Physikalischen, objektiven Nachweis solcher Veränderungen im Raumfeld zu bekommen. Wenn man
If you approach such a goal in a technical way, you must first determine the background. That is, which magnetic field conditions are present in the room itself.
Wir haben dann in einer weiteren Messreihe
we made a further series of measurements a little above the table by stretching out a measuring sheet there whenever a client was on the table. So we could then compare these values with the background measurements, with the magnetic field of the table without human influence.
Magnetfeld des Tisches ohne menschlichen Einfluss. Die Ergebnisse,
the results provide a kind of map or terrain display, as seen here on the screen, with a three-dimensional representation. Here the heights were combined to the measured values. Here the measured values were arranged by height.
in diesem Fall
The best part about doing things yourself?
In this case, we see the measurement, which was made on the ground. You can see that the field is quite restless. There are relatively severely fluctuating values. The next display shows the field as we measured it on the measuring table. It is much more balanced, which shows that the installation in itself provides a good balance of the magnetic field values.
Der Magnetfeldwerte schafft. Diese Situation wurde ebenso auf dem Tisch.
This situation has also been measured on the table in the presence of the energy worker who has activated a certain energy program. We see that the field is still pretty balanced, but there are small differences to the previous image. To make it clearer, I use the difference of the measured values between the two previously described situations.
Zwischen den beiden vorher erläuterten Situationen aus. Die Differenz ergibt dann den Effekt, den
The difference is the effect that Lucas caused by activation of the energy programs. We see in this chart a structured effect. Upon closer inspection, you can see a kind of grid line, especially in two preferred directions. These are reminiscent of the magnetic field structure, as they are found on well-known energy spots, places where people feel special bioenergetic effects and where healings occur.
energetische Wirkungen verspüren und wo auch Heilungen vorkommen. Damit konnten wir objektiv
This enabled us to objectively provide evidence that Lucas is able to structure the field in this way. Particularly noteworthy here is that the strongest measured effect occurs right here, where the energy worker sat during the session.
während der Sitzung saß.
Wir haben dann zum Ende hin, nachdem wir die unterschiedlichen
Towards the end, after we displayed the different energy levels, we were able to recognize in the measurement that this energy has a measurable effect, especially that a human in the process has a huge impact, and that the energy worker in the process is also visible as the one who directs the energy.
in dem Vorgang auch sichtbar wird als der die Energie leitet.
Such measured results are still the exception, though.
I think the development of science and technology in the modern world and modern spirituality, especially spirituality, has learned from technology or science, precisely because these findings, which have been made to the smallest scale, down to the atom and even further, as well as to the largest scale, that is, into space, how our universe is structured, are something that was quickly integrated into the spiritual worldview. The opposite direction is a bit more difficult, although there have been more and more scientists, starting from Max Planck, who noticed that the more they investigate, they reach the limits of the mind. They realize that things are not only material, not only physical, but that there is something like a spiritual reality, thoughts that have an effect and similar. But these people are few, because they must go against their own doctrine of science and are often treated with hostility or even dismissed as crackpots. While in the reverse case, it is natural, as a spiritual person living in the modern world, to look at and use modern scientific findings. Hence, the path from science to spirituality is easier than vice versa.
Die klassische Naturwissenschaft hat
Classical science has no answer to the question of why such effects are healing or energizing. In reality, we now certainly have explanations for these phenomena.
haben wir heute durchaus Erklärungsansätze für diese Phänomene. Die wissenschaftlichen Denker, die am weitesten vorangekommen sind, ausgehend von der
The scientific thinkers who have made the most progress based on quantum physics have not stopped at these barriers that the field of physics has shown us. These are the smallest scales, the so-called Planck scale, as it is called in physics. One cannot go below this scale with physical means. But we know today that there is a reality beyond these barriers. Leading thinkers describe something beyond that being the range of spirit, and that consciousness, the mind, is woven into the fabric of space and time.
Der geistige Bereich liegt und dass der Geist, das Bewusstsein gleichsam eingewoben ist in das Geflecht von Raum und Zeit. Und wir können das auch von der wissenschaftlichen Seite her heute so.
And we can tell from the scientific side today, because we find that the smallest elementary processes are affected by this.
Von dieser Seite her beeinflusst werden. Nun wird oft eingewandt, dass Einflüsse
Now it is often argued that influences at this elementary level would be so weak that, for example, the thermal motion of molecules, which always have a degree of uncertainty, would wipe it all out or compensate it. But if we now consider that there is the phenomenon of the so-called coherence, where many molecules behave identically according to certain laws, then it means that patterns are amplified tremendously on an elementary level.
Dass Weichenstellungen auf elementarer Ebene ungemein verstärkt werden können. Wir wissen zum Beispiel,
we know, for example, today that in water, approximately 13 million individual water molecules join together into coherent structures that vibrate in a strictly coordinated way. Then water molecules do not act individually anymore, but collectively, and that means a huge amplification. And this is an effect that occurs constantly in our body fluids. Water is indeed the main constituent material of our body. When a certain field structuring influence through such coherence is reinforced in our body, it's only a small step to imagine that even incredible effects in the body are possible. And in the cells, water is 100% coherent. That is also the reason why biochemical reactions in a healthy cell are ordered and so wonderfully run.
wenn wir Kohärenz
If we understand coherence as a particularly high degree of order, then the question arises, how can you create order, or how you can support the body in the reestablishment of order if something is out of order?
unterstützen, wenn etwas in Unordnung geraten ist. Und eine wunderbare Vorlage dieser Art, die uns die
And a wonderful example of this kind that nature offers us are crystals. We also know that water is purified during its natural path through the ground, through its...
I'm a millionaire? I'm not a millionaire.
Crypto is complicated. You can hand your taxes off to me.
Rock crystal has a lot of similarities with the element of water. Water, when it freezes, takes on the same hexagonal shape that we know as a snowflake. Stones are now often placed in water, and then this water is ingested as gemstone water. Apart from the subjective effect, it can be demonstrated here that a change has taken place in the water through the information. Methods, such as the water crystals by Emoto or the drop image method by Ruth Kübler, show that water actually changes qualitatively without any substances brought into the water, but only by the information which the water has absorbed.
To think of gems and crystals only as tools for harmonizing human condition, though, would be a disservice to realizing the true potential of both the stones and humans.
Even beyond their healing power, crystals are absolutely justified or can be of help. Basically, we can say that if we are doing fine, if we feel normal, then there still is much to learn. Basically, stones can help to acquire skills. If you want to train something specific, if you want to learn something, this can be from learning to play an instrument through to expanding your own awareness. their crystals can provide a useful support.
Meine persönliche Erfahrung ist, dass Kristalle im Besonderen
My personal experience is that crystals in particular promote the development of humans energetically and accelerate them. It goes along with the change of consciousness, with the change in the awareness that more and more people are opening up to the subtle levels of perception. And since the crystals are highly experienceable at these levels, people are opening up to crystals and their properties.
öffnen sich die Menschen auch für die Kristalle und deren Eigenschaften.
Consequently, we can use healing crystals not only for physical healing purposes, but they should primarily be used for emotional stability and, above all, to support spiritual development. There are wonderful healing crystals that act as spiritual catalyzers, with whom we can go through processes very quickly, for which you previously had to do years of therapy. That, to me, is really the main advantage in using crystals, that we have in our spiritual work great helpers and tools that facilitate and accelerate the work.
Mir erschien es immer so, dass die Kristalle uns, und das lässt sich schwer beweisen, sondern nur beobachten.
To me, it always appeared that crystals, and that is difficult to prove, but can only be observed, encourage us in the development of our subtle awareness possibilities. That through the crystals, our consciousness is enabled to perceive beyond the normal spectrum of awareness. Crystals are helpers on our path. They are not, I would say, something that magically gives us consciousness, but they encourage us to develop our own ways.
Bewusstseinskräfte schenkt, sondern sie regen uns an, unsere eigenen Möglichkeiten zu entfalten.
Das heißt, von unserer geistigen Entwicklung.
From the viewpoint of spiritual development, the crystals, the healing stones, are for me personally the strongest tool to grow a divine consciousness, to mature, to what all religions speak of as the goal, namely unity consciousness.
Nämlich zur Bewusstheit der Einheit.
A developing awareness that recognizes the same spiritual foundation in everything will easily also include the crystals as part of a conscious world.
Also ich betrachte Steine durchaus als Leben.
So I do view stones as life forms. If you view the time in a geological scale and begin to think in millions of years, you'll see that even in the realm of stones there are developments. That stones are born from the depths of the earth, and that they have their period in which they exist at the surface, and then pass away again, are dissolved and reformed into other rocks. For me, these are also life processes that we as people do not normally notice. If you consider this dimension, then certainly also communication between man and stone can happen.
Mensch und Stein entstehen.
Entering into a stone circle of Earthkeeper crystals, we can recognize their effect on their immediate surroundings as carriers of a specific consciousness. Over the years, Wolfgang Hahl, a visionary and spiritual teacher, has collected many impressively large crystals. He has created an extensive network of powerful crystals with the goal of helping harmonize the energy body of the Earth itself through their healing properties.
Der Name Erdenhüterkristalle leitet sich von alten indianischen.
The name Earthkeeper crystals derived from ancient Indian prophecy. In these prophecies, The appearance of huge crystals will be announced at this time. It is said that ages ago, beings of light, our creators, went into huge crystal bodies to act in the future as protectors for the Earth and for humanity, and to stay there until then. If we remember that quartz is the only imperishable material in the universe, then that makes sense. Because rock crystals can, as we have heard, lie millions of years in the earth without decaying. And so, say Indian legends, would end this period, when humans increasingly destroy the earth and devastate nature. These beings of light would become active when their bodies are found in the earth, taken out, and are able to spread their healing properties.
Diese Lichtwesen ihre heilende Wirkung verbreiten können. Das Ganze fing damit an, dass ich
The whole thing started 25 years ago when, after a seminar in a meditation, I had a vision of the
Question: would you build a website for a major brand with more than 200 million users
of the earth.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now.
Spirit. I heard in my mind at the same time a voice instructing me exactly and explaining that the future would be about me gathering so-called Earth Keeper crystals from around the world and to use them for earth healing. That it was necessary to save these giant crystals and protect them, and that these giant crystals were urgently needed for the stabilization of the energy field of the earth, but also to raise the human consciousness, and that it was my job to start this process. This seemed, of course, to me to be just as crazy as it sounds to anybody hearing this first. As a result, I ignored the whole thing for a while, until actually several worldwide active merchants spontaneously invited me to visit them in Brazil. After the third invitation, I thought, this cannot be a coincidence anymore, and accepted the invitation. And in fact, on the same day, when I arrived in Brazil, for the first time after a long time, huge golden yellow citrine crystals had been found.
gelbe Zitrinkristalle gefunden.
Now there are many interesting events to tell about them. But in summary, let me say that this was the first Earthkeeper crystal that came into my life, and that it took several days of negotiations in order to save this crystal from cutting and grinding. In the following years, hundreds of giant crystals were brought to me in mysterious ways and under the strangest circumstances, even in periods when I considered this more of a curse than a blessing, when I had to spend my time again and sacrificing all my money in order to save these large crystals from being cut.
Sie vorm Zerschneiden zu retten. Wenn Kristalle
When crystals find their way to us, find their way into our lives, we should always make ourselves aware that we are not their owners, but realize that we are just a blip in comparison to these crystal beings, that they may exist for hundreds of millions of years and will continue to exist for even billions of years if they are not physically destroyed, and that we are relatively short-lived beings in comparison to them.
im Vergleich zu ihnen. Sämtliche hier auf diesem Platz und in unserem
All the giant crystals gathered here in the square and in the Museum of the Earthkeeper crystals perhaps represent only 1% of the amount of Earthkeeper crystals which were brought to me in the last 20 years. Most of them were passed on to people in healing places, to private homes, to hospitals, to clinics, in order to unfold their healing energy and to support people in their spiritual work.
Energie zu entfalten und Menschen in ihrer spirituellen Arbeit zu unterstützen. Warum das
What this whole thing has to do with earth healing becomes understandable when we realize that the ultimate earth healing is only possible with a global shift in consciousness. What good is it if we plant trees and reforest when the next people go and cut them down again? Consequently, we can only really permanently save or heal the earth if there are more people who are committed to develop their awareness. And that is an essential task of the Earthkeeper crystals.
Ich wünsche mir, dass immer mehr Menschen
I hope that more and more people around the world get together in groups to operate in meditations with Earthkeeper crystals to heal the earth. The more we open our hearts to compassion for all other creatures, and out of compassion the need arises to heal, the more the spiritual forces bring us the supporters and helpers.
und Helfer zuführen. Letztendlich
Ultimately, this means that they will help us grow our consciousness. The whole world is speaking of a rise in consciousness, to the extent that we wake up eventually to a higher truth, namely the truth that we are all one, that we are all cells of a large body. The crystal entities have given me a very touching message, that they are not only the oldest beings and the first beings who were on Earth, but also that they will be the last ones to leave, that it is their duty to manifest the divine light of the universe here on Earth. And they therefore had to emerge as the first here, had to get a form, and will pass away as last, when all is gone, when this earth, this sun is remelted. This touched me greatly, to make myself aware of this.
I have searched for the deeper relationship between humans and crystals, and I have found a treasure that cannot be measured in carats. It is the relationship that humans and stones can ennoble each other. To become crystalline from within does not mean solidifying, not petrification, but establishing a coherence both in our bodies and consciousness.
With MailChimp, you can design beautiful marketing assets in no time.
Where are you? We got some work to do now. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now.